The afternoon sun glinted off the sleek glass of the Chicago Convention Center, reflecting 1,000 moving shapes as attendees shuffled inside for the annual National Tech and Innovation Expo. Among them, Alice Green walked with quiet resolve, her hand wrapped firmly around her younger brother Stefan's. The convention was alive with color and chatter, executives in tailored suits brushing shoulders with wide-eyed students and digital creators. Alice's sneakers squeaked faintly against the polished floor as she scanned the sign overhead. VIP Access, Hall B. She adjusted the strap of her weathered backpack and glanced down at Stefan, who clutched his sketchpad close to his chest. His eyes darted nervously across the crowd. "Stay close," she said, guiding him through the throng of people. "We just need to get our badges scanned." The VIP check-in area stood cordoned off, manned by a woman in a sharp blue blazer who looked over attendees with the weariness of someone who had judged too many faces. Her name tag read, Karen Lutz. She caught sight of the approaching siblings and immediately narrowed her eyes. Alice offered a polite smile, reaching into her bag and pulling out 2 printed QR codes. "We're here for the robotics keynote. We've got VIP?" Karen raised a hand to stop her. "VIP is for invited contributors, not spectators," she said, her eyes moving deliberately over Alice's thrift store hoodie and Stefan's untied shoes. "Public entry is on the lower floor," Alice blinked. "These were issued by Genesis Core on behalf of the Green Legacy program," she explained. "There should be a note in the system under Alice Green." Karen didn't bother checking. Her expression turned dismissive, lips pressed into a line. "These are not valid, and I've seen plenty of kids try printing fake passes. It's not gonna fly here." Stefan shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't fake anything," he said softly. Karen gave a short laugh. "Right, and I'm the CEO of Tesla." She turned to the guard beside her. "Can you escort them out, please?" Freinint the security officer, a stocky man with a headset and indifferent eyes, stepped forward without hesitation. "You'll need to move along, now." Alice held her ground. "We're not trespassing. These codes are legitimate. Our mother's work—" Karen's tone sharpened. "Your mother doesn't matter here. And if you don't leave, I'll have you both removed and banned for the weekend." A small crowd had begun to gather. A few nearby tech enthusiasts paused mid-conversation to watch. 2 men holding podcast mics turned their cameras slightly toward the exchange, murmuring under their breath. Stefan tightened his grip on Alice's hand, and his voice quivered as he whispered, "Why are they looking at us like we don't belong?" Alice swallowed hard. "Because they've already decided that," she whispered back. The guard took a step forward, but Alice moved first, pulling her brother gently away. "It's fine. We'll go." As they walked past the crowd, a teenage boy in a branded startup hoodie chuckled and nudged his friend. "Did you see that? VIP passes, my ass." The words stung more than Alice admitted. She kept walking until they were out of sight, past the tall banners boasting innovation, progress, and inclusion. Stefan's breathing grew uneven, and Alice led him toward a side corridor with vending machines and worn seats. "Sit here for a second," she said, guiding him to a bench. Stefan opened his sketchpad and began drawing. His pencil scratched lightly against the page, forming the outlines of a humanoid drone they'd seen on a live stream. It was his way of staying grounded. Alice watched the entrance from a distance, her hands clenched into fists. The buzzing in her ears wouldn't fade. The rage, the humiliation, the unfairness of it all burned hotter than she thought possible. A man with a conference lanyard walked past and glanced at them, then quickly looked away. No one said anything. No one offered help. No one questioned why 2 young teenagers had been turned away without verification. Alice opened her phone and pulled up the confirmation email again. The Green Legacy Program, a fund honoring her late mother's contributions to Genesis Core, had given her direct access to VIP panels. Her name was on the list. It had been approved. It should have been enough. She stared at the familiar logo on her phone's screen. The stylized G her mother had helped design, still used in every Genesis product today. Her mother's name wasn't on plaques or statues. It had been buried, forgotten, her contributions erased when she died of a sudden stroke 3 years ago. But Alice hadn't forgotten. Stefan looked up from his drawing. They said we didn't look like VIPs. Alice met his eyes. That's because they don't know what VIP really means. She opened her backpack and took out a small, outdated smartwatch. The strap was fraying. The display had a faint crack in the corner. But it still booted up. Her mother had given it to her on her 15th birthday. Embedded inside was a dormant digital key, a master override to Genesis Core's event systems. Alice had never used it before, but now her finger hovered over the screen, ready to activate it. Across the convention, neon lights blinked. Artificial voices made announcements. Booths displayed marvels of engineering. Innovation hung in the air like a promise. But for Alice and Stefan, standing just outside the doors, innovation had no name for justice. Not yet. She looked at her brother, then at the watch. "They'll remember us," she said quietly, and she pressed the screen. The smartwatch vibrated faintly in Alice's palm, a soft pulse barely noticeable against the din of the convention. She glanced at Stefan, who sat hunched beside her, silently sketching mechanical arms onto a blank page. His focus masked the sting of humiliation that lingered on both of their faces. Alice tapped the screen again, slower this time, waiting for the buried interface to appear. A pale blue shimmer spread across the watch face. Lines of encrypted code unfolded in succession, most of them unreadable to the average user. But Alice understood them. She'd seen similar strings while watching their mother work late into the night, muttering quietly about firewalls and ethical locks. Buried in the sequence was a 4-digit prompt. She exhaled, then typed in her mother's birthday. The code. Accepted. A new interface materialized, marked with a single name, Leela Green. Legacy access key enabled. The memory of her mother's voice surfaced immediately. "Only activate this if you're not safe," Layla had once told her, eyes serious, tone unmistakably protective. "And only when it's clear they've forgotten who you are." Stefan paused his sketching and leaned over to peek at the screen. "What is that?" Alice didn't look up. "A door Mom left behind. For us." She tapped a small icon in the corner, one that most users wouldn't recognize. It resembled a glowing leaf, but Alice knew what it really was. The Genesis override. Node. Accessing it would trigger an internal system ping to select devices connected to the original Green framework, the very one powering the Tech Expo's core architecture. Stefan blinked, unsure. "Are you sure we should be using it?" Alice nodded without hesitation. "They used her work to build this entire system, Stefan. She gave them everything. They tossed her name out the minute she died." Her jaw tightened. It's time they remember who helped start it. The device buzzed again, this time longer. Alice watched as the interface sent out a silent signal. It traveled through back-end systems, relays, encrypted networks, triggering access requests, and credential pings. Most would go unnoticed, buried beneath mountains of daily data. But one would not. 3 states away, inside a private office on the 40th floor of a steel and glass tower in downtown Seattle, a man's phone lit up. Priority override. Leela Green protocol activated. Marshall Green paused mid-sentence during a quarterly board call, his voice trailing off. Around him, corporate executives waited for him to continue, but he didn't. He stared at the screen, pulse rising. He hadn't seen that alert in over a decade, not since the day his sister passed. He rose from his leather chair without a word. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Dana, stepped into the doorway as he approached. "Sir?" "Get the plane ready," Marshall said flatly, already reaching for his coat. Destination, Chicago. Back inside the convention center, Alice's smartwatch dimmed. There was no immediate sign of change, no alarms, no flashing lights, but she knew the signal had been received. Stefan tugged lightly on her sleeve. What if no one shows up? "He will," Alice said. "He promised Mom he'd always look out for us, even if we never saw him again." A silence settled between them, filled only by the distant hum of panels resuming and digital displays flipping through sponsored ads. A robotic dog trotted past with glowing eyes, drawing cheers from a crowd of children near the central hall. Across the corridor, Karen Lutz sipped coffee and laughed with another staffer, her earlier aggression erased, as if it had never happened. Stefan's eyes followed her. They looked so calm. Alice didn't respond. Her fingers tapped the armrest beside her, not from anxiety, but control. She couldn't allow herself to feel defeated. Not now. Not after activating the one key that could unravel the silence that had buried their mother's legacy. She shifted her gaze to the towering banners that hung from the ceiling. Building tomorrow. Together. The words now felt like an insult. "I remember when she used to bring us to her lab," Alice said suddenly. "She always smelled like solder and vanilla tea." Stefan smiled faintly. "She let me test that first voice bot, remember? The one that only answered in rhymes." "Yeah. And you made it say, fart, in 12 different haikus." Stefan laughed under his breath. "She still gave me cookies for it." Alice looked at him, her expression softening for the first time that day. She wanted us to build things that mattered, that helped people. She never cared about fame or credit. "Then why hide her name?" he asked quietly. Alice's face darkened. "Because when you don't look like the people in charge, they treat you like you don't belong, no matter what you build." Stefan stared down at his sketchpad. He began drawing again, but this time he wasn't sketching robots. He was sketching faces, their own, standing on a stage, spotlights behind them, applause raining down. "I want to finish what she started," he said quietly. Alice nodded, her throat tightening. "Me too." Across the hall, a large display suddenly flickered. A glitch, barely noticeable, but enough to make a few people glance up. A technician rushed over, confused by the interruption. Then, a small square appeared in the corner of the screen, the glowing leaf symbol. The system had accepted her override. Alice stood slowly. Stefan stood with her. She turned toward the main entrance. Somewhere far above, someone had just received her message. And soon, the people who'd laughed them out of the building would learn that power isn't about appearances. It's about who remembers the root of everything that matters. And this time, they weren't going to forget. Marshall Green descended the jet's staircase as the wind tugged at the hem of his tailored coat. The Chicago skyline loomed ahead, its mirrored towers bathed in cold afternoon light. His expression remained unreadable, the alert still glowing faintly on his smartwatch. The plane door closed behind him, and within seconds, a waiting SUV pulled up to the private tarmac. Straight to the Expo, he said, sliding into the back seat. The driver nodded and merged onto the highway. Traffic blurred past in streaks of gray and silver. Marshall stared out the window, his mind racing through timelines, names, and security protocols. He hadn't spoken to Alice or Stefan in nearly 2 years, not since their mother's funeral. He'd kept his distance, letting grief swallow the connection. But now, her signature had resurfaced, alive inside the system they'd tried to erase her from. Inside the Expo Center, Alice sat on the edge of the bench, phone in hand, screen dim. Notifications popped up. Emails, event updates, promotional, messages. None relevant. The override had gone through, but silence followed. She began doubting herself. Stefan tapped her shoulder. What if the signal didn't work? Alice didn't answer immediately. Her eyes traced the crowd, watching faces glide past without pause or notice. The building pulsed with motion, but it moved around them as though they didn't exist. It worked, she said at last. He's coming. From across the corridor, Karen Lutz stood with a clipboard, gesturing to staff. Her laugh echoed down the tiled hallway. A man in a dark vest leaned toward her and whispered something. She glanced in Alice's direction, then shrugged dismissively. Nothing to worry about, she muttered, brushing past a volunteer who'd attempted to flag her attention. Near the main atrium, a janitor in a green uniform wheeled a cart along the carpet. His name badge read Miguel. He swept methodically, pausing only when he noticed Alice and Stefan seated alone, surrounded by people who kept their distance. He slowed as he neared them, carefully checking that no one else was watching. Then he leaned his elbow casually on the cart handle. You two got thrown out? Alice looked up, unsure whether to respond. Stefan answered first. They said our passes were fake. Miguel shook his head. They pull that kind of stunt all the time. Last year they kicked out a girl just because she didn't have the right shoes. Alice narrowed her eyes. Do they ever apologize? Miguel chuckled without humor. Apologies aren't part of the script here. He slid a folded piece of paper from beneath the cleaning supplies and discreetly handed it to her. There's someone inside who doesn't play politics. Find her. Ask for Natalia Vega. She works back-end coordination. Doesn't take crap from anyone. Alice unfolded the note. A terminal ID and internal extension were scribbled on it. Before she could ask further, Miguel had already started moving, pushing the cart down another hallway, his presence swallowed by the current of workers. And machines, Alice stood, gripping the note. Let's go. They wound their way through the side halls, past unused seminar rooms and empty refreshment stands. Few paid attention to them. Everyone assumed they were just more lost kids or unpaid interns. No one stopped them. Eventually, they reached a sliding door labeled Service Zone, authorized staff only. Alice took a breath and pressed the call button beside it. A voice crackled from the intercom. State your role. I need to speak with Natalia Vega. Immediate priority, Alice said clearly. A pause followed. Then the door hissed open. Inside, rows of workstations blinked beneath industrial lights. Technicians moved quietly among screens, servers, and cables. A tall woman with sharp features and a no-nonsense stare approached. Her name tag read, Natalia. You're not staff, she said, arms folded. I'm Alice Green, Alice replied, standing straighter. My mother co-developed the Green framework. I triggered an override 20 minutes ago. It was routed through legacy access. I believe you received it. Natalia didn't blink. And the boy? My brother. Stefan. Natalia stared at her for another moment, then motioned them forward. Follow me. They passed rows of digital schematics and internal monitoring systems. At one terminal, a flashing icon pulsed. Natalia gestured toward it. That's the override you sent. We verified the signature. It matches the green master key. You shouldn't have had access to that. It was hers, Alice replied. She gave it to me. Natalia exhaled slowly. This key activated dormant subroutines, security flags, shareholder alerts, archived credentials. Most people don't even know those modules still exist. They erased her name, Alice said. I want them to explain why. Natalia studied her again. You're not the only one who noticed. There's been a lot of pushback behind the scenes, people pretending she never contributed. Can you give us access? Alice asked. To the main floor? No, Alice said. To the network feeds, cameras, audio logs, staff records. Natalia raised an eyebrow. You want to collect evidence. I want to show them the truth. Natalia gave a small nod. Come with me. She led them deeper into the back end, through a room filled with humming machines and secured terminals. On one screen, live feeds showed the main stage. Another displayed access logs. A third streamed internal comms between staff. Natalia began unlocking access points. You'll have 15 minutes before system lockdown triggers. After that, you'll need executive clearance to continue. Alice stepped forward and placed her mother's smartwatch on the data port. The device synced instantly. Lines of code spilled across the screens and hidden folders blinked into view. Stefan watched in awe. It's like a digital vault. Alice turned toward the feed displaying the keynote room. Dozens of attendees filled the seats. The speaker began discussing algorithmic fairness, ironic given the day's events. Stefan pointed at the screen. Look, she's in the front row. Karen Lutz sat smiling beside a panelist, sipping bottled water. They still don't know who we are, Stefan said. Alice replied without looking away. They will. And in that moment, across town, Marshall's SUV pulled into the Expo's underground garage. The storm had arrived. The convention's main auditorium gleamed beneath rows of synchronized LED lights. A hush settled over the massive crowd as the keynote speaker clicked to the next slide. Lines of code danced across the screen behind him, accompanied by praise-filled commentary about digital equity and innovation ethics. Applause followed. Smiles lingered across executive tables. Marshall Green stepped through the double doors at the rear of the hall, flanked by two assistants. His arrival went unnoticed at first. He moved with a calm confidence, his tailored suit crisp, shoes silent against the floor. He paused only once, his eyes scanning the sea of faces, before proceeding down the central aisle. On stage, the speaker continued. We stand today on decades of genius, visionaries whose minds built the tools we now use to bridge divides. Marshall's footsteps slowed as he reached the front row. Karen Lutz sat among partners and board representatives, her expression relaxed. The sight of her sipping mineral water sparked something cold and deliberate inside him. He turned to one of the staff, nearby, and whispered two words. Shut everything. Lights flickered, microphones buzzed, a deep hum rolled across the hall like an awakening machine. The screen behind the speaker froze mid-frame, then faded. Whispers spread like wildfire. In the control room, Natalia glanced toward Alice. That was him. He's here. Alice's stomach flipped, but she didn't flinch. Her hands continued working the keyboard, transferring video clips, audio logs, and time-stamped profiles into a secure folder. Each file contained moments of dismissal, laughter, false accusations, and manipulation. Stefan stood behind her, monitoring the live camera feeds. In the auditorium, Marshall stepped calmly onto the now silent stage. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't need an invitation. The audience quieted instantly. Phones rose. Attendees whispered to each other as recognition bloomed. Gasps followed. A woman near the media pit muttered, "He said, niece and nephew?" Screens blinked back to life, now displaying surveillance footage. The lobby, the check-in counter, Karen's face visible, her gestures, her voice, captured. Clearly, probably fake passes. They all try this stuff. Alice had trimmed the footage to make sure nothing was missed. Karen stood up. "This is a mistake. That footage?" Marshall raised a hand. "Please sit down." He turned toward the room. "My sister passed 3 years ago. She wasn't just a developer. She was a systems architect. She believed in transparency, accountability, and inclusion, not on paper, but in practice." He glanced briefly toward the audience, then back toward the screen. What happened today isn't new. It's repeated, buried, sanitized, but it stops now. Alice's face appeared on the screen. Then Stefan's. Then the sequence of their removal. Security pushing them aside, onlookers watching silently. Natalia's voice came through a secondary feed. "He's activated the whistleblower archive. Everything you pulled is going live." Alice kept her eyes on the screen. "Let it burn." Back in the hall, Marshall turned as the final clip played. Karen mocking the children near a colleague, laughing as she used the phrase, "street kids pretending to be VIPs." The room fell into a silence thick enough to crush. Karen took a step forward, eyes desperate. "I was following security protocol." Marshall's eyes didn't waver. "You never even scanned their badges." Security approached her from both sides. "You are relieved of duty," he said calmly. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately." Karen's mouth opened in protest, but no words emerged. A ripple of clapping started near the back of the room. Hesitant at first, then louder. People stood, applauding, not just the removal, but the fact that someone had finally broken the cycle of silence. Marshall looked toward the technician managing the AV equipment. "Run the audit. Overlay. All displays synchronized." A dashboard bloomed onto the screens. Over 400 flagged incidents from the past year, each involving dismissals based on race, appearance, or social status. Complaint forms, internal messages, suppressed footage. All filed, time-stamped, and matched to individual employees. A low hum of outrage began to rise. Executives paled. Journalists typed furiously. One man in a navy blazer approached Marshall, clearly shaken. "You'll destroy this company," Marshall replied without blinking. "Then it deserves to be rebuilt." Upstairs, Alice and Stefan stepped away from the monitors as the security firewall auto-triggered. Natalia nodded to them. "Your job's done." Stefan looked toward his sister. They saw everything. Alice nodded, her voice soft. Now they have to choose what to do with it. In the hall, Marshall concluded with a final statement. "I'm placing all operations under review for 48 hours. During that time, staff will be reassigned, investigated, or removed. Attendance reimbursements will be handled in full. My team will coordinate next steps." He paused. "But first, I'd like to bring someone to the stage." He turned toward the back, where a second door opened, and Alice stepped into the light. The room parted without command. Rows of onlookers shifted, some standing, others craning, necks to see. Cameras turned, flashes beginning to pop. Alice walked down the aisle alone, every step deliberate, her boots echoing off marble beneath the hush. Behind her, Stefan followed, his sketch pad tucked tightly beneath one arm. Marshall met her at center stage. No words passed between them, only a nod, a silent acknowledgement of lineage, of trust restored. Alice turned to face the audience. A sea of corporate leaders, developers, students, and press stared back, caught somewhere between discomfort and anticipation. Her pulse thudded, but she didn't let it show. "My name is Alice Green," she began, voice steady, not loud but unwavering. "My mother helped build the infrastructure this entire expo depends on. Today, that legacy was nearly erased, not by accident, but by choice." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few bowed their heads. Others remained frozen, waiting for what would come next. She believed in giving people space to rise, regardless of how they looked, spoke, or dressed. She wrote algorithms that prioritized fairness, not profit. Yet we were thrown out like we didn't exist, not because of faulty credentials, but because no one bothered to look past our skin. Marshall watched from the side, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "I didn't come here to shame anyone," Alice continued, "but I also won't protect those who gatekeep progress. What happened today wasn't isolated. It's a pattern, visible only to those pushed to the margins." Stefan moved to stand beside her. He didn't speak, but lifted his sketchpad and opened it, holding it out for the front row to see. On the page was a drawing of the morning's incident. Alice standing at the counter, Stefan beside her, guards approaching. The emotion was etched into every pencil line. "She processes pain through code," Stefan said quietly. "I do it through images. Neither should be ignored." The applause began in pockets, first from the students near the rear, then spreading to panelists, reporters, and even some vendors. It grew louder, becoming more than approval. It was acknowledgement. Marshall stepped forward again. "Effective immediately, this event will be rebranded. No longer will it operate under a hollow mission of equity. From this day forward, the Green Legacy Initiative will oversee all education and inclusion programming." He paused, gaze hardening. "Let this mark the start of a different blueprint." Natalia's voice came through the overhead system. "System logs scrubbed, corrupted entries restored. Priority updates live across internal archives. Oversight, tracking enabled." Downstairs, Karen sat slumped in a private security office, eyes red, hands clenched. Her badge lay discarded on the table beside her. She stared at a frozen frame on the monitor, Alice speaking into the microphone, regret flooding the edges of her posture. Outside the building, a crowd had gathered. Word had spread fast. News vans lined the street. Screens broadcast the live, streamed to sidewalks where strangers watched in silence. Some held signs already, hastily written phrases. "Innovation needs inclusion." Green was here first. Erase prejudice, not people. Inside, Marshall handed Alice a small, black case. She opened it. Inside sat a metallic chip embedded with a digital seal, the master key to the green framework. "Your mother built something too honest for this industry," he said. "Now it belongs to the next generation." Alice's fingers curled around the case. "I won't let her be forgotten again." "You won't have to," he replied. Stefan tugged her sleeve, pointing toward the media section. Naomi Rivera, a young reporter from the Tribune, stood recording, her face wet with quiet, tears. She had profiled Layla Green years ago, after her death. But editors buried the story. Now, she captured the reckoning she'd always hoped would come. As the auditorium emptied, Stefan leaned on the edge of the platform, watching engineers pack cables, volunteers rearrange signage, maintenance teams repainting digital displays with a new banner. The Green Initiative. Real innovation starts with recognition. Later that evening, the city skyline glimmered through a hotel window. Alice stood by the glass, holding her mother's old smartwatch. She no longer needed it to be heard, but she couldn't let it go just yet. Stefan sat cross-legged on the floor, updating his sketch, a reimagined version of the first one. This time, the guards weren't pushing them out. They were listening. The counterstaff was different, more welcoming. And Alice stood at the podium, not in protest, but as the lead speaker. He looked up. "Think we changed anything?" Alice smiled faintly. "Not everything, but maybe enough to start something." In the corner of the room, Marshall sipped tea in silence, watching his niece and nephew with a look no one had seen him wear in years. Peace. The green name had returned. Not through vengeance, but through undeniable truth.